and gave it some parameters. Let's me.
Let's see.
Um,
I don't want to light, and your phone will adjust accordingly. But I'll go through various ways to make sure you can set up your phone to acquire the correct exposure needed for for dim objects, and just different creative ways to see things that maybe you wouldn't try before. So for the agenda of my talk, talk about assumptions, what I'm going to cover in this talk, uh, optional accessories you can use to help make it a little bit easier to use your phone to take long exposure images, how you activate night mode on your phone, how you change exposure settings or have access to those exposure settings, how you can localize your exposure for a particular part of the image, like say the moon embedded in a larger scene, uh, and then post-processing with tools on your camera, not even on your computer. And then I'll show some images taken with an iPhone, just the camera itself, and then also a camera attached to a telescope. To the right, if you can see, it is the constellation shots are a little harder to show, but that is an iPhone shot. It's taken here at the Ferris Observatory. You can see the Pleiades in the lower right, and the upper left is the W of Cassiopeia, and that's a 3-second exposure, I believe. So I am really basing this on my experience with my phone. There are, of course, many different models out there and many different iOS versions. I updated to iOS version 26, so immediately my night mode settings look different and are in different places and that kind of thing. So I had to relearn that. But I know more recent models, of course, have many more capabilities. I'm not covering Android, but I'm assuming Android has similar capabilities for night mode imaging. And there are apps out there for night mode. I did have an older iPhone SE second generation, and I downloaded a night mode app, and it helped a little, but it wasn't nearly as good as the real Apple night mode. And the camera settings do vary depending again on which phone you have. The screen can be different for accessing exposures and things like that. The maximum exposure time in night mode can change. The iPhone 13 is at 10 seconds max. Recent models go up to 30 seconds, so that's important to know. And in fact, some recent models can even do night mode with time lapse, so I could see how you would set it up for hours to say show the Milky Way moving across the sky, that kind of thing. The zoom range for the different lenses on the phones is different too, because you may want to, if you're looking at an eyepiece, zoom in on a crater on the moon. And so again, it depends what model you have as to what zoom capability you have. And the F number of those lenses, the faster the lenses, the shorter the exposure needs to be. For example, in normal mode on my phone, it was great for taking auroras. As soon as I went to wide angle, they were much dimmer because it's a slower lens for wide angle. You don't notice that in daytime shots, but at night it wasn't worth using the wide angle lens because it was a slower lens. But I'm assuming recent models may be better in that department too. So there are some optional accessories you need. I want to emphasize you don't need any of these to really do the photography at night. But if you do have like a 30-second exposure, you certainly want a tripod to hold the phone. That's difficult. I can go up to 10 seconds on mine, and I've gotten away with it, resting it on the eyepiece, for example. But generally, you want to hold it with something. The object here in the middle is magnetic. So if your phone has magnetic, MagSafe capability, you can just lop it on there and it'll hold it on your tripod. And on the right is a Celestron adapter. I have one here in the room, an eyepiece. You can come and take a look at it, but it will position your phone accurately, the lens of your phone right over the eyepiece of the lens, and put it at the right distance from the lens. If you're too far away from the eyepiece, you won't see the whole field of view. If you're too close, you won't see the whole field of view. You have to bring it in and out so that you see the whole shot that you can get. You don't want to waste a scene if you can't position it correctly. And then this illustrates the phone on the holder. This is a side view. Here's the eyepiece here. And in the middle here is, of course, the phone. These knobs here, there's a knob right here that sets this distance from the camera or the phone to the eyepiece. And then there's two other knobs here, X and Y knobs, I would call them, to move it in X and Y directions to center the lens over the eyepiece. it really is very handy. I think there are other models from other companies. I found this really convenient for really, putting your phone right where it needs to be. Because if you're off just a little bit, you'll see the image go away. You really have to be centered on there. Um, and again, I've gotten away with not using that too, where I can just rest the camera right on the rubber eye guard of the eyepiece, especially if you have a 2-inch eyepiece. This only holds 1.25-inch eyepieces. There may be 2-inch models out there from other companies, but with a 2-inch eyepiece, that's a lot to rest on. So you can bring it down and shift it around till you see the moon or whatever you're looking at, and you can take your picture. So again, all these accessories are helpful, but they're not required. You can get around it all, especially with constellations. You just hold up the phone and just be as steady as possible, or rest against your car, whatever you need to do. You can still get a pretty good image. So for night mode activation, again, this is an Apple version, but you will see a little crescent moon symbol and somewhere along the top of your phone. And if you press that, that can activate night mode. Now, if you're actually in a dark environment, it will activate automatically. If you're in a bright room like this, you may not see this at all because the room is too bright to use it. You actually have to go outside or whatever into a dark room, and then you'll see this as an option. And so this shows here, if it's not bright yellow, it's turned off. If it becomes yellow, it's turned on. And you want to keep your flash off because I think, at least in my experience, sometimes that goes off at the wrong time when you're trying to do a night mode shot, and it doesn't help you at all. It just messes things up. And then you can then swipe up once you know night mode is available. You can swipe up and actually see a whole slew of selections for different parts of your camera, and night mode is on there. Again, you can press that to activate it. And for the version I have, if you press it once, you'll get a 1-second exposure, and it shows the 1 here next to the crescent. If you press it a couple times, you get 3 seconds. You press it again, you get 10 seconds. So again, to see this choice of 10 seconds, you have to be in a dark enough place to support it. But it's nice to know. So I assume on newer models, you can see 30 seconds on there as a choice. And then there's other ways to adjust exposure. A lot of times when your phone is looking at the moon through an eyepiece, for example, it shows it really bright and overexposed. And the phone itself is really forcing some kind of exposure level on you. So if you really want to make that a correct exposure, you actually tap the moon. Say the moon is right here. You would actually tap the moon itself, and a box will appear around the moon, and the moon will dim and look pretty good because it's now adjusting to lunar brightness. And then if you still want to adjust it up or down, there's a little sun symbol next to it, and you can touch that and move your finger up and down, and it will brighten or dim the moon right here. An optional way is, again, if you swipe up on your phone, there's this exposure button. If you press that, there'll be a slider, and you can adjust the brightness up or down before you start recording. But again, a lot of times, if you're just looking at constellations, there's really no choice in the matter. You can choose a long exposure, but there isn't a lot to do. It's really the brighter objects that seem to be overexposed where you want to use this tap method to dim it down a little bit. The sun will be the same way. First of all, you have to filter the sun in the telescope, but when you're looking at it, it may still look very overexposed on the camera screen. So just go in and tap the sun and then dim it down. And then for post-processing, once you take a picture, you open up the picture, you'll see at the bottom of the screen this multi-bar symbol here. If you touch on that, it gives you a lot of selections to now change the brightness of it, the exposure, the contrast, the color, vibrancy, the tint. You can crop it with this button. Maybe you have a big picture with a small thing you want to focus on. You can crop it down to that object. But this is for color corrections. This is cropping. This is live mode, which you don't need, but you can turn it off, I guess. You wouldn't be doing this in live mode anyway. So again, it's amazing what on the phone itself, once you've taken a picture, what you can do to make it better without even using the computer at all. And it really shows well on the phone itself. You can, of course, import your pictures onto your computer and use Photoshop or whatever you want to try and improve it that way. But again, if you're looking for something simple and quick, the phone itself is amazingly capable. So I'll just show you some examples of pictures. Again, I'll start with just the camera itself. And then with the telescope, this is with the camera itself. It's just showing Cygnus and the Milky Way in here. This is a 10-second exposure taken from, I think, Nice Observatory this summer when we were doing tours. But here again, I'm not sure how well you can see them, but Orion is up here. So stop working. On the left, in the middle, on the bottom is Sagittarius in the Milky Way. This is all from the Ferris Center. And on the right is Scorpius. The phone is best for auroras. Even if you can barely see the colors with your eye, the iPhone immediately brings them out vividly. These are 3-second exposures, handheld. And this is, a couple years ago when we had the really big auroral display. This is in Webster. And it just really, this is actually toward the south. The aurora went really far south in the sky. Here's Virgo, and here's a crescent moon below the green aurora. But I find night mode is best for aurora. And a few more pictures here. Some of these are actually taken here at Ferris. So there was another big display. You'll see Cassiopeia up here, the Pleiades down here, and of course, all the different colors that are available. So I recommend night mode for auroras above anything else. And then the crescent moon in the morning sky. This is a wide angle view of ice crystals one winter night around the moon. There was an inner ring and an outer ring with a few stars here. I think this is Capella up here, but did a really good job. You will see whether if it's a very bright object in your view, there's an internal lens reflection of the green spot. I don't know how to get rid of it, but I think it's just multiple bounces inside the lens assembly, and you can't. The coatings on it don't minimize that. And on the right, this is Venus and the moon one evening. So it's pretty good at catching that. This is a morning view to capture the clouds, but the crescent moon is way up here, very small. And I think I did in this case choose the wider angle lens to capture some pretty clouds in the moon. And this is actually a totally eclipsed moon, very small, hard to see, but it was just showing how stars around it came out. Leo was over here, and it was pretty cool to see that. And then moonlight is great for illuminating a dark site. This is the Nice Observatory with some clouds in the northern sky, and showing the red lights on the inside of the building. This was a full moon over Farish. After one meeting. There was fog down here in the valley. And then, of course, the observatory is lit up by moonlight.
Sounds like Ansel Adams portrait, full moon over Farish.
Yes. This, I think, is the ISS. Just shows, over a few seconds how it's moved. This is actually a telescope view. This is not a camera only. This is a weather balloon we saw here one night. Dave Haas and I were here with a 20-inch. And we saw a bright point of light in the sky in the southwest. And I've seen this before in Rochester, where you look at binoculars and you realize it's a weather balloon. They launch them from the weather service in Buffalo, and they drift slowly, east. But you see the balloon itself, and then below it is an instrument package, and it's connected by some kind of a, supporting cord here. And you'll see it swinging back and forth. And I guess when this gets to about 100,000 feet, it bursts, so the thing will pop, and then you see all these sparkly pieces of balloon falling down. But it's really neat to look in a telescope. So I just threw the phone on the eyepiece. It took multiple shots. It was pretty difficult. The exposure was pretty bad. But just to get a sense of what you see in the eyepiece when a weather balloon goes by.
It was just orbiting the airplane, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know how they clear that with all the traffic in and out.
I don't think that's what it was. That's right.
Yeah. And then this is Comet Atlas. Did come out that well. There's one here and one here. It certainly was easy to see with binoculars. And then even clouds, even though clouds are our enemy, they can be interesting. This is a sunrise, some color. This is a weird cloud structure around the full moon one night as it was rising. I thought that was interesting. And then again, just full moon and how it's framed by all the clouds. This is the sun framed by some clouds. It almost looks 3D to me, but kind of just a fun way to use the phone for weather stuff. And then this is now through the telescope, where I actually think I handheld the phone just on the eyepiece in the Tinsley. So you magnify what you can with the eyepiece and just hold it there. And it's kind of nice here. It's not night mode, it's just daylight mode because it's sunlight on the moon. And the phone's pretty good at choosing exposure. But I think I still kind of just tap on the image to try and tone it down if it's overwhelmed by light. But this is the Apennine Mountains on the moon. And then, this is a lower magnification view. The Tinsley is just great visually for the moon and if you want to do phone photography. I really recommend that scope because it has such a long focal length that it really zooms in right away with any eyepiece that you have. And then here's the moon in daylight, blue sky. And here, I don't remember if my phone was close enough to see the full field of view, but I think it probably was. It was just the way the eyepiece is set up. And then crescent moon here. And then Crater Copernicus. I think this is with the Tinsley, actually. And then another crescent moon. And the sun, of course, you have to use a filter. Don't try this. Either fry your eye or fry your phone. But it really collects, we've had so many sunspots lately. It's so neat just to be able to quickly capture what you viewed. Certainly, an Astro camera does a lot higher resolution, but it's fun just to see what's going on. And occasionally jets have gone by, but my phone wasn't on there at the same time, so I didn't capture that. Then lunar eclipses is just, again, putting my phone up against the low power eyepiece. This was totality. This is the partial phase of the eclipse. But it adjusts really well. And it is important to tap on this guy to make sure you brighten it up, because in the eyepiece it was a pretty dim eclipse. And again, with the processing tools on the phone itself, it's easy to brighten this up if it was too dim. If you're overexposed, it's hard you can bring it down, but it's a little harder to make a good image. And then this again is with the telescope. This is actually with the Mies, or these two are with the Mies 24-inch, but this is M13, and a satellite came in. You'll see 1 million satellites in your pictures any night you do it, especially if it's a wide field kind of a thing. But it is what it is. At least you can just snap another picture. This is the Pleiades low power view through a smaller telescope. Maybe a hint of nebula, I don't know, but that takes longer exposure. And this is M11 in Scutum. So it does show stars pretty well. And then nebula, this is the Ring Nebula. This is the Dumbbell Nebula. Again, no one expects deep sky, multi-hour quality. But again, if you just want to record what you were looking at, it's fun just to get a sense of what was there. Then comets, this is Comet Atlas, but through binoculars, not a telescope. I needed a wider field of view, so I just picked the binoculars to take a 3-second or 10-second exposure. Not very good contrast. There was some, daylight in there, and some dusk light from the sun, but perhaps with more modifying the data, you could get some better images. And because it's low power and a short exposure, you don't see smearing from the comet if it's moving across, because like the current comet Lemon, in a matter of 1 minute, you're going to see it shifted in the stars, and probably even in seconds. It depends on the comet, how close it is, how fast it's moving. And then finally, this is just a double star called Alberio, taken with a 24-inch Mies, and it's showing that strong orange color. This is supposed to be blue, I think bluish, this dimmer one, it's not really showing up. But again, it's just a neat way to get a quick view. And on some of the tours at Mies, we were showing people how to put their phones up to the eyepiece and they could snap it. But people did have difficulty, moving the lens around to really, center it and capture it. It's very easy if you shift a little bit, it's kind of gone. So just keep trying. And you can actually look at the lens kind of from the side and see where your lens of your phone is and see where your eyepiece is, and just, approximately get it there and then move it around. If you have a tool to move it, it makes it a lot easier. But these are all those telescope ones here were handheld, and you kind of get the knack of it after a while, and you learn how to be really still. Like, don't drink a lot of coffee or anything that makes you nervous. That's that. just a quick look.
Can you get mine up?
Let's see.
Which lens do you try to align with your eyepiece? The wide angle, the telephoto?
I just have two lenses, and I just use the regular, not the super wide. Use just the regular eyepiece.
I'll cover that in mine. Okay, great. Thanks. Were most of those pictures taken with 3-second exposure?
Yes, they actually were. Some of the last ones were the 10-second of those star clusters at the Mies. It took me a while to figure out, oh, I can just make this longer, and I finally did it. But most were 3-second, especially in constellations, because I was just holding it like this. But it's worth a try.
And just a simple question. So when you're lining up your lens eyepiece, which lens are you lining up?
I'll go through that in my talk.
Yeah, I mean, you can try either one, really. It's which whenever gives you the best results, I would say too.
Before we start, Dave Hassenauer had 2 questions.
Sure.
For audio one.
Hey, Kevin, nice talk. Hey, I got 2 questions. The first one is I'm still using iOS 18.7. When you upgraded, were you happy that you upgraded to, I guess it was 26, or are you unhappy that you upgraded to 26?
Initially, I had to hunt things down to find the buttons. I guess I do like being able to tap on the crescent button to change exposure. On the older version, to change exposure to 10 seconds, there's a slider, I remember.
Yeah, although there is also a button if you had that little up arrow that would get you to the night mode. You had a slider for you're right, that for the 10 seconds, I guess that was only a slider, but there is the button for the exposure, which is kind of an annoying slider. So
Yeah, the button for the exposure, though, is kind of once you see the brightness, I think you can adjust it with that button, but the exposure doesn't set the exposure time, ironically.
okay.
Yeah, it's confusing. It
Yeah.
just it's kind of like a gain setting. You can brighten it or dim it.
Mm-hmm. And the second question I had was, have you ever tried using the raw image mode on the iPhone? I haven't, but I was curious if you ever have.
No, I'm not. I didn't know I could do that, actually. I mean,
Yeah, it's a choice. I have no idea, what to do with it once I got it, but it's a
I think
choice.
RAW would probably be if you intend to import it into Photoshop or something, because I know with Photoshop, there's a lot of latitude with RAW files. That's my guess.
Okay. But thanks. Good talk.
Oh, sure. Thanks.
And then Nick Lamondola asks, do you have to adjust the screen brightness at all?
The phone screen, no, it actually shows up. The constellations, I think, show up really well. I mean, assuming you're in the dark anyway, you can see pretty well whatever you're doing, whether it's bright or dim. Any other questions? Okay. And later there is a actual phone here with the holder there if you want to turn the knobs and see what you're adjusting.
I am Brian Oyer, and Kevin and I did our talks presentations separately, so there may be a little bit of overlap here, but there are some things that I got into that he didn't. My first image here, of course, is an example of what night mode is meant for, and that is shooting things at night. And why? Okay, hang on. We got to put my screen up here. I don't have presentation mode showing here. There we go.
Should go over there.
Now will it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously the phone is adjusting what? Is it the ISO? Is it the shutter speed, or both? And I'll be giving some examples of that. And of course, as Kevin said, one of the coolest things to do with an iPhone is Aurora. You can actually hold the thing up and see the Aurora on the screen where you can't see it with the naked eye, even without having taken a night mode picture. shows up on the screen quite nicely. And by the way, I have an iPhone 15 Pro and also running iOS 26. So as Kevin said, some of the things on this phone may be different from other models, but they probably all will do the same thing eventually. Just a Milky Way shot and comet shots. But if you want to do something through a telescope, then you got to have some way of attaching the iPhone to the scope. Something bright like this, maybe the sun and the moon, you could get away with hand holding. But if these were taken with a Celestron 8-inch from my driveway. So you can imagine the heat waves going up in front of the sun image. So that's not real sharp. The moon came out remarkably well. This is with just a 32 millimeter eyepiece and my iPhone attached so that it's looking into it. If you want to do deep sky, you absolutely have to have the phone attached to the telescope. Now, on my iPhone, I could do 30 seconds, and these are 30-second exposures. This is my first try, and so it must be simple. The phone was automatically deciding what kind of exposure to do on these. And this, again, was with an 8-inch SCT. Now, I have an Apple Watch, and if you have that, I'm sure maybe Android has the same capabilities. There's a setting on there, the camera remote. You set that up, and your watch will look like on the right there. The 3 seconds means you tap that, and it'll wait 3 seconds in case you want to put it behind your back or something, if you're taking a picture of yourself. But if you tap on those 3 dots there, it'll change to just tap it, and it takes the picture. And that way you avoid any shaking of the telescope while you're taking the exposure. Now, most phones now have more than one lens on the back. A lot of them have 2. Yeah, the iPhone Pro has 3. And this lens up here, this is they call it the ultra wide / macro. And it's a 13 millimeter wide, that's really wide angle. But it only has 12 megapixels. This telephoto, again on my iPhone, on the Pro Max, I think that's even higher focal, 77, there's a 80 or 90 or whatever. It's just moderately telephoto. This is also a 12 megapixel lens. This lens is the standard lens. It's actually wide angle. They call it wide angle because the old SLRs were the prime lens they used was a 50 millimeter lens, and they said that was normal. And anything with a shorter focal length, which was a wider field, they call it wide angle. Now, if you tap on the buttons, well, I'll show you the buttons. You can ignore the solar image for now. I had this aimed at a tapestry that had a sun on it just for the purposes of the talk. But you can see across the bottom these numbers. And for those of you at home, right there. First one is 0.5. And that takes you to the ultra wide lens. Now that lens automatically becomes a macro. If you get real close to a subject, it goes into macro mode. And that can create a problem because when I was trying this the first time, I had the telescope looking through one of the other lenses, And when that macro lens got close to the telescope eyepiece area, it automatically shunted the iPhone into macro mode. And I'm thinking, why am I seeing this gear stuff over here? And I finally realized it does show an icon when that happens, a little tulip or something that shows you're in macro mode. And if you tap on that, it goes back, because I don't recommend using this lens for astrophotography. This is the one that I would use. It's actually a 24 millimeter lens, but if you tap on it twice, it becomes 28 millimeter, and a third tap moves it to 35 millimeter. Now this is a 48 megapixel lens, and to my thinking, that means that's the one you probably should use in astrophotography. The other two lenses are 12 megapixel. I have had experience with, aim it at something and you tap on that and it will zoom in and out with those three options there. The number 2 button next to it there, that just takes the same lens and doubles the focal length to 48, but it also cuts the megapixels down. So the 3, that turns on the third lens, the telephoto lens. And again, that's 12 megapixels. So my assumption is that using the standard lens with the 24 or whatever else, the other 2 choices you want, is the best option. If you want to make it larger, do it in Photoshop or something like that. It's going to give you the best image to work with, in my experience.
Right?
Yes.
If you tap on one of those lenses, will it fix it on that lens, or because my phone, while I'm futzing around trying to get it in the field view, it'll switch lenses on. It'll go to another lens because I think it's not seeing anything between one of the lenses.
Well, that may be your macro mode going in. I don't think you'd have that problem if you're using the telephoto lens. But the only time that switches automatically from one lens to another, as far as I know, is in macro mode, and that's with the ultra wide angle lens. So when the light is low, as Kevin said, the night mode automatically appears. And on mine, you notice on his, there was a icon on the left side of the screen. Well, in my later model, it's over on the right side with the crescent moon there. That'll appear if it's dark enough. And there'll be a digit in there telling how many seconds it thinks it's going to take the picture for. That'll be between 1 and, in my case, 30 seconds. My phone will go up to 30 seconds. Now here's a picture of that tapestry. It was in a fairly dark room, but not dark enough for night mode to come into view. And this will show what the settings that the phone actually chose. And if you look for those at home over here, whoops. Says I use the 24 millimeter lens, and it used an ISO. It shows an ISO of 6400 at a shutter speed of 1/15 of a second. Now in this photograph, I got night mode to activate. You can see the picture is a lot brighter and a than the other was. To get the better photo, night mode decreased the ISO from 6400 down to 1250. That surprises me. I always assumed that if it has the ability to change the ISO, it would increase the ISO if it wants to bring in more light. But instead, it increased the shutter speed to 3.4 seconds. It decreased the ISO and increased the shutter speed.
Maybe to minimize noise in the image. You know, is there more noise at higher ISO?
Dynamic range.
Yeah,
I didn't hear what the speaker said here.
dynamic range.
I'm,
Increase in dynamic range. Lower ISO.
okay. Fortunately, we don't have to think about it. The phone does it all automatic. Now, as Kevin was saying, if you look on the screen, you see this square and the little image of the sun. It's lost in my tapestry. I found initially putting my finger on that sun and increasing and decreasing, raising it up and down was very difficult to do. And then I realized you can actually do it on any place on the screen. Just swipe on the screen or down. So if I were to swipe down on it, notice that it made the image darker. And when you take the image, that increased the ISO, but the shutter speed went from 3.4 to 0.8 seconds. Why is the phone doing that? In automatic mode, you don't have to worry about things like that. But I experimented swiping up and down and trying to see if I could get anything better than automatic mode, and I couldn't. So, of course, I've only been out there once or twice trying it. So, sliding up gave a brighter image by decreasing the ISO to 1250 and increasing the exposure time to 4.8 seconds. Now, these deep sky photos were taken in auto night mode, and the camera decided to use an ISO of 10,000 with an exposure of 30 seconds. Again, I tried swiping up and down on the screen, changing things, and I couldn't come up with anything better than what the camera was choosing to do. Finally, one thing you wonder about focusing. I was focusing with the telescope. Is that what you do as well, Kevin?
I focused initially with the telescope for my eye.
Yeah.
And then, but then really the camera has to find that same focus once you've gotten there.
Yeah. In my experience, what I did is I just found a bright star like Albireo. You can see, actually, I could see the star clusters and nebulae on the screen very, very faintly, but not bright enough to be able to focus on. So I would just move the telescope to a bright star, get that focus, and then go back to whatever deep sky object it might be after. And came out pretty well. The iPhone 15 got the blue out of it.
It did. Yeah,
So,
it's nice.
any questions?
With the three that you showed on the previous screen, was there any post-processing with those, or was that just the way it came?
Yes, there was post-processing in Photoshop. I think for the most part, I darkened them. But it took me back to the old days 50 years ago or more, when I would be out with my telescope icicles hanging off my nose with a joystick trying to guide the thing and come up with, and in 30 seconds, I'm getting something way better than I could then. Of course,
And is the telescope tracking in these cases too?
yes, yeah. This is with an LX200. Yes,
Is there any things that you need to take multiple exposures for and then overlay them?
I have thought of doing that. I haven't done it yet, but seems like it would work.
Are
Stacking it.
there any objects where just the 30 seconds won't work and you need to do an overlay to be able to see it?
Again, I haven't tried it, but if it makes sense that it might bring out more, I don't know.
I would think if you use Deep Sky Stacker software, which is freeware, to take multiple exposures and combine them. But you might have to take, 30, a lot to make a difference, but I don't know. I would think it would work.
Have you ever tried?
With an iPhone, no. With standard astronomy cameras, I've tried it. And certainly there are a lot of folks in the club who do it really well. I'm not an expert in that at all, but I see no reason why you couldn't take these and just stacking also.
Okay.
So it'll be the talk next year.
It would be neat if this had an auto mode to repeat the exposure, so you could just set it and leave it, assuming it's being held by something. And you're tracking well, take an hour of 30-second exposures. I would think it would work.
There's no way to do that on the iPhone.
To repeat.
Barometer.
Yeah.
No.
It's-
Well, if you have your remote on your watch, you can just sit back and keep tapping it.
As you're watching TV.
One has. You scroll through the far with this pro thing, and you can have features automatic or fixed when you want. So you can set it to autofocus, or you could focus to the nearest focus to infinity. So when I'm doing pictures of the sky without setting it down, I just tell it to focus on infinity.
Right.
And the one you just took of Orion had a lot of stars. That looked like a long exposure.
Yeah, that one, I didn't try focusing. I just swiped it to infinity and picked a high ISO 32 seconds
Oh,
and then just set it on the chair for. I wasn't really watching that. I was watching the sky. And then every now and then it was like, okay, it's time for another picture. So I'd start another one. And then during one of those, I saw the meteor and
yeah.
the camera was recording at the time. So that was nice.
Was this while we almost cooking?
Yeah, well, it was
I like that comment.
kill some time, so I would go out and watch.
So you can buy a chair to hold your phone if you want.
But yeah, it was interesting. It was brighter than any of the meteors. Yes.
Jeff, did I answer your question about the lenses?
Yes, and while I was playing around with my phone. Mine only has 2 lenses.
Okay,
So, but
that's missing the telephoto then, probably.
Yeah, so I detected where the 0.5 lens is and the 1.
Yeah.
So I would be looking for the lower lens. On the line
Yeah.
up or like eyeball it.
Right.
Yeah.
You could even, like if you have a little flashlight, kind of bring it onto the side, and as you're looking at the camera screen and you're moving it around with that fixture there, you actually see the eyepiece, eye lens, and if you have light shining in, you can then get it pretty close. And once you're close, you have to start looking for the object itself and making sure it's a fully illuminated field. If you're not centered, one side of the view might be bright, the other side of the sky might be dim. So then adjust those knobs a little more until everything's balanced. That means you're seeing the full field.
So when you were talking about depth also, so you have to play with the depth.
Yeah.
You don't want the lens as close to the eyepiece as possible.
Well, sometimes it has, it's called eye relief, where the eye has to be to see the full field of view of an eyepiece. Sometimes eye relief is very short, and you have to put your phone right on the eye cup, or if the eye cup can be fold it down, because you might have to get your camera a little closer see the full field. But that's usually short focal length, high magnification eyepieces that have that problem. You're typically using a low magnification, like a 32 millimeter or 25 millimeter. And that has a lot of room usually for the camera to move around and find the best distance.
That brings up the difference between the adapters to attach them to the telescope. The one I have, I don't have the ability of raising or lowering it.
Mhm.
So in my case, it was right flat on the eye cup.
Yeah.
Um,
And that might work out because maybe that's where they put the best position to view things anyway, is where the eye cup is, because that's where you put your eye. So it may work out anyway, but it's just nice to be able to adjust it.
but I've been wondering if I use a higher power eyepiece, if I used a 15 millimeter eyepiece.
You probably wouldn't be able to get in. That's my
Yeah.
guess. Because you know how there's just features on the phone that stick out and right around the lens there's like a bevel.
Yeah.
It might interfere with something, you know.
Yep.
But,
You pay for the third dimension. So the ones that just move in two directions are in the $20-$30 range.
Yeah,
The three directional one, it's like up close to 100 last time.
I think the stuff is like $60 now, something like that. But it's up there.
So I got a cheap one.
But they are nice.
And of course, you can get them used on Astromart probably for $30 or something. So.
I do something similar with not astrophotography, but I have a small 80 millimeter refractor that I take hiking, just looking at wildlife. And I've got my cell phone with me all the time. So I'll take pictures with the wildlife with that. And I found just putting two fingers on the eyepiece.
Yes.
So that way I get the right distance. Then I just rest it on my fingers.
Uh-huh.
That way I've got the right distance from the eyepiece. You only have one hand left for controlling it.
Yeah, no, it works. Yeah.
So do some of you who know more about this than I do have more explanation as to why the iPhone is choosing various ISOs?
I was gonna ask, have you guys heard of any software that, or apps that can control your camera on your iPhone?
I think they're out. I think I've seen a few titles, but again, I haven't downloaded them to try them out. But you have to show like F number or number seconds.
Yeah, there are apps and I have some, but I've found
Yeah.
them
In fact, I wonder.
cumbersome to use.
Completely manual.
Yeah.
You choose everything.
Yeah.
There's one called K-Live that I've heard good things about. I played with it a little bit.
I have one called Pro Camera that I like, although I've tried it using with my 40 millimeter PST solar H alpha solar telescope, and I still kind of struggle getting good shots of the sun with it. But Pro Camera is an iPhone app that lets you kind of control everything.
You're adding a layer of complexity with a narrow band. The three color cameras don't really like the narrow band. Like
The solar
the
imaging.
solar, you're talking about an angstrom, less than an angstrom. GB sensors just don't handle it.
And is it very dim too? Because it's so narrow.
Yeah, I've played with the DSLR at the solar building a couple times, and it just doesn't work like the modern camera. It's real challenging color camera.
Wow.
Yes,
So not knowing much about this, but going back to Craig's talk last month, he talked about like the focal ratio and that has an impact on astrophotography, like fast versus medium. So does that tie into this at all, or make much difference?
Yeah, for like again, like doing Aurora with what I call the standard lens for the iPhone, nice bright images. If I go to the extra wide angle lens, it's like an f3 instead of an f1.5. I don't remember the numbers, but it's slower, and you can immediately see a much dimmer, unexciting view with the same exposure time. You may want that wide angle for other reasons, but you're giving up brightness of the image. Now, maybe you can bring it up in the editing afterwards. It's probably a noisier looking image. So yeah, I think the faster the lens, the lower the f number, the shorter the exposure has to be, which means you don't have to hold the phone extra long to keep it steady. The shorter you can hold it, if you're doing it just holding it, the better. So I bet some of these newer phones have some very fast lenses. I just don't know the actual numbers with what they can do.
Does anyone know, are these are these lenses image stabilized on these phones?
I don't think so. I mean, if you move, you get a shaky looking image.
It's
Yeah.
surprising though, how you can take a 3-second exposure at
Sure.
night mode. and
Yeah,
it-
that's why I was kind of assuming they must
Yeah.
be image stabilized.
I think it's doing internal stacking. I don't think it's image stabilized so much
Yeah.
as doing multiple images and kind of doing an automatic sort of stacking over the 3-second or 10-second. I could be wrong. I don't know for sure, but I don't think that they've got image stabilizations. I mean, knowing enough about cell phone lens design, I don't think they've got image stabilization technology in there.
Thanks. I was wondering how they could get those long exposures, handheld like that. That
Yeah,
makes sense, though.
I think it's I think it's an internal stacking image processing step that happens after you capture the image and
Gotcha.
the multiple images. It's my guess.
Yeah, because right after you finish the exposure, you see that circle spinning as it's calculating the image, and I bet it's happening then.
Yeah, but you never see the blue screen of death, so that's good.
So in my experience with the old days with film, if you're shooting something at a ISO of 10,000, you're going to have so much grain you can't see anything. Does that happen with the digital photography, or because I mean those these were taken at 10,000 ISO, and
They
I
look
just
good.
can't believe it. Go ahead.
I was going to say they look good. Yeah, I mean I had the same experience with film astrophotography, although I don't think I ever even imagined the concept of 10,000 ISO back then. 1600 we were living.
Yeah.
But and I've had a lot of experience doing iPhone photography on the large Mount Wilson telescopes, and the ISO doesn't seem to matter. Whatever the technology is now, the grain does not seem to be objectionable for any of the images I've taken.
And Dave, do you handheld the phone when you're doing the Mount Wilson pictures?
I do. In fact, I've got an email constructed just to send you that I'll send you after. But it does help the fact that these are 4-inch custom eyepieces. And so I can just kind of cut my hand around the eyepiece, get the alignment, which is still tricky, but I've done it enough times that I'm pretty good at it. And then I breathe in deep, hold my breath for 10 seconds, and it usually works out okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, and
cool.
there's no adapter that we've got that actually would work on it. I do have
Yeah.
one of the adapters for my own telescopes, but for the it's just easier to just cup it with your hand, and and it's such a huge eyepiece that it's almost like a binocular. You can almost look at it with both eyes.
Oh, that's cool.
In the time we've got left, do people want to see like a demonstration of how you use this?
Yeah, we can do that.
I can turn the camera down, just turn the lights down.
Sure. And I assume it's still drizzling outside.
Yeah.
So,
In Rochester?
Yeah, we've got some extras.
yeah, I think we just. I'm doing the soul. So, yeah,
It's saying that these actually got on this stuff, and it's a volumes and three this axis and this seems to. Right, this works really well, that the axis that they need for the iris is. Yes. Here's your basic. Yeah, phones and this to the other two apps here. You got physically nice way, and just like.
Yeah, right. And again, I just told him, because I told him, but you had to take on the work vertical, like work is there. Yeah, it's your eye needs to be, I think where it's not, is it's really long, open eye pieces, they have really big eyes. I don't see any culture of a whale, they get like a 48 millimeter 2 inch eyepiece. I think your eye would be like 2 inches out.
Yeah, I had to buy, they're coming today, actually. I had to buy little sandbags to put on the back of my telescope and balance all this. And, but yeah. We've got a point camera.
And you got, yeah, sorry, so there's got some chair.
With the zoom folks, I'm gonna move the camera to the telescope. That we put like a screen. And then if you wanna do the demonstration.
So if you want to get into the spacing, the distance to the iris, you can see like. This one knob will give you quite a range of distance, but again, it is usually close to the eyepiece itself. But it's just very handy there.
We need to stop the screen shares.
And then down here are two other knobs. This goes one way, this goes a perpendicular way. And so you can see everything that's going on as you're looking in the live view of your screen. But again, if you shine a flashlight into here, you'll see the rim of the eyepiece itself, and it'll show up on your phone. So as you're moving around, you can center the view on that rim of the eyepiece. And then usually the last thing I do is move the phone in or out just to get that full field of view.
What is the adapter you have?
It's Celestron Universal Phone Holder, I think they call it. Yeah. Like the Celestron next to that. So that's what I've seen so far. I had an older one before phones, digital cameras. This actually can hold a 2 inch eyepiece. It's pretty big. And I actually, this kind of goes up and down. It's spring loaded. I've actually put my phone on here sideways. But it does have, manually you can loosen this down here and slide this. It's not sliding right now, but you should be able to move this back and forth to set your distance. But this one, I haven't used it in a while because it's really more for digital cameras. If you have a digital camera that you want to put on your eyepiece, this is the one to use for it. There's also screws here to put it on a tripod if you wanted to. So at the very least, maybe it's to be used reverse to hold a phone like this on a tripod and take, like a 30-second exposure with that. But again, these like those magnetic holders and things are much more easy to use than something over like this.
Some YouTube videos I've looked at recommend taking the eyepiece off the telescope, mounting it on the camera holder first, and then aligning it as well as you can, and then putting it in the telescope. That makes it a lot easier to, yeah.
Yeah, you could certainly do that.
However, I do wish I was able to turn knobs and move the camera around.
Right.
With mine, especially it's spring-loaded thing, and it's very hard to move the iPhone. You can't move it vertically. You could only by putting extra washers in there. So this is an inexpensive one. That one really is more than $30.
Yeah, I think new they're around 60, but on Astronomy, I can. And then this you can pull this out here to get your phone in and out. So I don't know if something let's go that pretty far, but I think maybe some limitations on one of the larger phones for positioning, but they call it universal. So
Okay, so again, being spring-loaded there, that's what this one is, and that I have a hard time getting it out without moving everything all around.
yeah, it's kind of a pain. And you can tighten. There is a knob here to tighten this holder on the eyepiece. If it's too loose, it is going to flop all over the place. But you can loosen that and then open it up. It's like a vice grip thing. But this orange knob tightens it on the eyepiece, and it's pretty smooth. I don't think it's going to damage the eyepiece if you're worried about that. But it is limited. I mean, the eyepiece can't be way too big. And sometimes, the barrels of eyepieces are weird shapes. Like some Celestron one's going to go out just for cosmetics or something. And that might make it difficult to use the eyepiece with those. These standard, one size eyepieces are much easier to slide it on. And I always bring it, near the end of the eyepiece so that you have access to the busy part of where you're going to be viewing. But again, just keep turning this orange knob, get it pretty snug, and then you can put your phone on and move it around as you need to.
Hey, I've got a quick question. So one thing that I do see when I do my exposures on the Mount Wilson telescopes is that I often get purple blobs in reflection, which are from the infrared autofocus mechanism. And I usually can process those out. But is that something, and I don't recall seeing that so much on my smaller scopes. Do you ever recall seeing kind of these, erroneous purple blobs in your image when you've done any of your iPhone shots?
I don't think I have that infrared autofocus on my phone. I've never seen the red blobs in there. Now, I will say, if you put a timer on so that you can get 3 seconds or 5 seconds, whatever, before it actually takes exposure. Sometimes my phone switches into a flash mode, and suddenly it's flashing. Using the timer, which I find it. So maybe I'm not setting it up right. So I kind of avoid using a timer,
Right.
because it takes me out of the
Yeah.
no flash mode for some reason. So, but
Yeah.
as far as the red light from an autofocus, I haven't seen that in my particular model. Which
Yeah,
model do
no.
you have?
Yeah, it's very interesting. These purple blobs just in reflection, and it could be the design of the eyepieces that we use at Mount Wilson is just sort of interacting such that we, get a ghost reflection that's particularly focused. I don't know.
What model do you have, Dave?
I have an iPhone 12.
I'm on a phone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
an
on a phone.
iPhone 12.
Well, okay.
And I
I
have
heard they're
found,
really
like, I've
bad.
tried to, sometimes we'll have clients and I'll try to take a picture with their phone. I'm pretty experienced and they have trouble getting the alignment. So I'll try to do an experience or do it with their phone. And I find that iPhone like 16s and 14, they're harder. I'm much more successful with my iPhone 12 than I am with a later model iPhone. And I
Is
don't
it
know
possible?
why, but that's what I'm finding.
Is it possible to tip the phone a little bit to get rid of back reflections? That probably is very easy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, mostly though, I am, like you say, trying to get the whole field of view because,
Right.
the alignment, even though it's easier with those 4-inch eyepieces, it's not trivial. And so I'm mostly just trying to get the whole thing. And then I'll get it and it will look really good in the display. And then I'll do my 10 seconds and then I got these purple blobs that show up.
Yeah, the only blob I've noticed is like the bright moon. You have those internal lens reflections.
Yeah. The bright objects and their ghost reflections. Yeah, this is a different thing. I do think it's a part of a autofocus mechanism going on, but I'm not quite sure. But I do see it routinely with the when I do my Mount Wilson shots. But anyway, I'm gonna log off. But a great talk. Great
Okay,
talks
thanks.
for both of you. Thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Bye bye.
You have a cover over the lens? No. I think so. Yeah, but no, I think that's. I remember you. I can throw the dogs.
Thanks for knowing.
Thank you for knowing. Okay.
Yeah. You figure out mode yet, or are you still working?
Yeah, I sent it on late today.
Usually my camera first,
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but so is, there was stuff from here. That's one. Yeah, I'm gonna say that. Yeah, that was a main.
I wonder if we built this.